Welcome to WanaxTV live program. In this episode, we talk about the mythological and historical kings of Troy, or Wilusa, as it was known to the Hittites in late Bronze Age. Before we begin, I'd like to thank to everybody who is joining us live here, to all of the channel subscribers, Patreons, and YouTube members. And also, after this episode is over, at 10:30 a.m., about an hour from now, we are premiering our History of the Brigis episode, so make sure to stay and watch it. It's about the tribe of the Brigis, or Brigoi as they were known to the ancient Greeks, the European ancestors of the Phrygians. So make sure to check that out as well. When it comes to this episode, we'll go on and present some of the segments we're going to be talking about in the episode, as you can see on the screen right now. First, we'll touch the archaeological site of Troy, going all the way to late Neolithic period from the archaeological site of Troy 0. We'll touch on that. And then we'll go with the kings in Greek mythology, as they were known to the ancient Greeks, the mythological list of Trojan rulers, with Teucros, Dardanos, Elos, Erichtonius, Tros, Elos II, Laomedon, and finally Priam. And finally, we'll go into historical records of the contemporary Hittite Empire of the late Bronze Age. According to their records, we have 3 known historically recorded Trojan rulers, the kings of Wilusa, who are Kukuni, Alexandru, and Walmu. It is morning here in the East Coast, and it is afternoon in Greece. So welcome to everybody that's joining. And with that being said, we'll begin. So when it comes to the archaeological site of Troy, we know that the site has been inhabited from about late second half to late 4th millennium BCE. As you can see on the screen, we have Troy 1, actually Troy 0, where the first remnants of the settlement are founded. Troy 0 is a pre-Bronze Age layer where there are limited founds of pottery and wooden beams, and its dating is tentative due to scarce records. Not many archaeological founds here, but we do know that some kind of settlement existed there very early on, early Bronze Age / late Neolithic period. We do not know who the people at this point in time are. Who are the people inhabiting the site of Troy, the northwestern part of Asia Minor? There are no records, and that's a great question in general, who those people were. So moving on, we have Troy 1 and Troy 2. Those are believed to be continuous. It's a continuous settlement going possibly to Troy 0. There's been a small settlement, a small citadel built at that time, and it spans from roughly 3000 BC all the way till about 2300. And you can see all the layers on the screen. The time period that interests us the most is Troy 6 and Troy 7a. Those are the historical sites. Those are the archaeological sites that correspond with historical Wilusa of the late Bronze Age Hittite records and of mythological Troy. When it comes to Troy 6, And at this point, we are not sure if there has been any population shift, if there has been any arrival of new settlers at Troy because of the scarce archaeological founds. Well, one of the most important people when it comes to the excavation of the historic archaeological site, which is considered to be historical Troy, Heinrich Schliemann, he also managed to, unfortunately, destroy some of the evidence before recording it while he was digging and digging the site. So we have lost much of the information when it comes to archaeology about the sites of Troy 3, Troy 4, and so on. And as we arrive to Middle to Late Bronze Age, the sites of Troy 6 and Troy 7a, we are now in the area which is historically recorded by the Hittites, the neighboring Hittites. Unfortunately, we do not have much concrete evidence or records on Bronze Age Troy. In Linear B records of the Mycenaeans, the nature of the records was mostly the nature of the writing. It was mostly based on administrative records and so on. And the Hittites, on the other hand, did really good job of recording the political situation around them throughout history. But before we continue with the historical era, which will bring us to the three historically recorded kings of Wilusa, we will touch on the mythological context of how Troy was viewed by the ancient Greeks through Greek mythology. So we will move to that. And before we move to the mythological kings of Troy, we do know that Troy 7a is the site that corresponds to the time period of the destruction of Troy as it was recorded in Greek mythology, the Trojan War, and the subsequent fall and destruction of Troy, which is considered to have happened at around 1180 BC, early 12th century BC, and it corresponds well with the archaeological site of Troy 7a, which is also reportedly destroyed at the same time. Now, with that being said, we're going to move on to the mythological kings of Troy. As you can see, there are a list of monarchs that Greeks ruled the city preceding Trojan War, preceding the time of Priam. As you can see, his final king. There are many more before him, and we'll touch on the myths on the founding of Troy, of the early kingdoms in that area, early Trojan kingdoms, and we'll finally arrive to the time period of the Trojan War. Before we do so, we have quite a few people joining us live here. So I would like to thank to everybody who is online right now. It says good morning, Wanax. Well, good morning to you as well. Glad to see you teaching Greek legendary history. Well, this is a pilot episode. So this format, we are still in the testing phase to see how it looks, to see how it goes with the audience. If you like these live episodes, they are going to be additional content. So the main content will still be the regular WanaxTV episodes. For example, the history of the Brigis that's coming out in about 1 hour. We'll touch on the Phrygian ancestors as they were recorded in the ancient sources. They are a little known group of tribes, and there's not much information on them especially on here on YouTube among the history channels. So it will be an interesting episode for sure. And as for the major news, major developments of the channel, we are working on the large complete Etruscan history documentary, which will be about 2 hours, more than 2 hours long. And that's the primary reason why we were not able to produce episodes on a consistent schedule, because we are working very hard on that one. We have a professional narrator for that episode as well, so it will not be me narrating the episode. It will be the best production we ever put, for sure. Being Russo says Wanax has the best channel. Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's a channel still in development. We have some big plans, especially in winter. Once the Etruscan civilization is out, we will try to be as consistent as possible. We'll try to do 3 to 4 episodes per month, starting from possibly November, probably December, and going into April. So we'll have a lot of content coming on. When is it coming out, the Etruscan video? So the Etruscan video should be out in late September / early October. Currently, we are done with the voice, with the audio, and we passed the halfway point on the final animations. So there's not a lot of work left. We are in the final stages, so to say, but since this is the biggest project that I have ever undertaken, we are trying to make sure that everything is on point, that you get a top-notch production. That's why it's taking so long. Green Russo Etruscans have Anatolian origin. Well, we'll touch on that in the episode. It will be the most comprehensive Etruscan video on YouTube. That's for sure. That was my goal from the start. We'll go through the origins of the Etruscans. We'll go through different theories as they were presented by ancient Greek sources. We will go through the possible, with the stories of the Lydian / Pelasgian origins from Asia Minor, and then moving into the Italian peninsula. We will go through Dionysius of Halicarnassus's account, where he says that they are most likely, they originate from nowhere else but from Italy, where they lived. So a lot of different views on the Etruscans during the ancient times. We'll go through that. We'll go through their language. We'll go through the similarities with the Lemnian language, with the Rhaetian language. Question: have you studied the Etruscan language? Well, I have researched the Etruscan language. That would be the correct term. I did not study it, obviously, but I did my research. And in the Etruscan episode, when we do the documentary, you'll see all of the Etruscan city-states, all of the Etruscan names. They will be in Etruscan language, not in Latin, as we usually know. We know that one of the cities, Tarquini, is one of the most famous Etruscan cities, and that's how it's called in Latin. In Etruscan, it's called Tarcuna. So we're calling it Tarcuna in the documentary. More about the Etruscan kings of Rome would be interesting. We'll cover that as well. It will be very far-reaching, comprehensive history. We'll go through the origins, through the language. We'll go through the foundational myths of the Etruscans themselves, and then we'll slowly go through semi-historical and historical times. We'll go through Etruscan in early interaction with the Greeks, early interaction with the Latins and Romans, with the final 3 kings of Rome, who were all of the Etruscan origin. Tarquin the Elder, Servius Tullius, and Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. We'll cover them as well. And we'll cover wars with the Greeks, wars with the Celtic peoples from the north, continuous wars with the Romans, and gradual decline and the fall at the hands of the Roman Republic. So it will be over 2 hours. So we'll cover everything. Okay, Luis Aldam is in the chat. Well, I'm glad to have you here. Welcome. For those who just joined right now, make sure that you stay after this live episode is over, because we are having History of the Brigies episode at 10:15 a.m. Now it's 9:40, so in less than an hour. This episode will be done in less than an hour, and then we're going straight to the history of the Brigies. All right, so back to the mythological kings of Troy. So we have gone through a quick overview of the archaeological site. And now we are here with the list of mythological Trojan rulers as they were known in the Greek legends. The very first ruler is Teucros, or Teucer, as we know him in English. So at the time, this is considered to be a dim past. There's no date attached to it. It's deep into Greek mythology. Prince Teucros, either from Attica, according to Dionysius of Halicarnassus, or from Crete, according to Roman poet Virgil. So we'll go with Dionysius's version. He was a leader of one of the Athenian tribes, one of the tribes of Attica originally, when he, together with his followers, decided to sail overseas and eventually settled in the area of northeastern Asia Minor, where today's Troy is located, where, well, let's say historical Troy is located, excuse me. And when he arrived there with his companions, he did find indigenous autochthonous people there. So he had to defeat those people in battle. There are no mentions in Greek mythology who those autochthonous people were. But obviously, even Greek mythology reports that even before the very earliest Trojan ruler, mythological Trojan ruler, there were still some people living in the area, so these people could correspond to the early inhabitants of the archaeological sites of Troy 0 to Troy 2, possibly Troy 5. We do not know. It's not very wise to make correlations between little-known archaeological sites and vague mythological stories. So, but we do know that even Teucros founded some people already inhabiting the area when he arrived. He defeated them and he established his own kingdom. He reportedly founded the city of Hamaxitos at the southern part of today's region of Troy, Troad, as it's called Troad in the classical sources, the whole area of Troy, the northeastern edge of Asia Minor. So he did not establish the city of Troy itself. Newsdrifter says, wouldn't they be Pelasgians? Well, they possibly would. Their Greek mythological Greek records do not explicitly say that those people were Pelasgians. They just mention autochthonous people which Teucros defeated. So they might have been Pelasgians. They might have been another group. Let's not forget that Pelasgians are not the only autochthonous people of the Aegean region as recorded in Greek mythology. We had other people such as Cucones, Leleagues, the Lelagoi, and we had several other groups as well. Pelasgians are the most prominent for sure, but those were not the only groups of peoples which we know in Greek mythology as autochthonous to the region. So whoever those people might have been, Teucros defeated them. He established his own kingdom, which he called Teucria. So at this point in Greek mythology, the earliest times of the dim past, as they call them, Teucros rules the region of Troy from the city of Hamaxitos, and his kingdom is called after himself, Teucria. So at some point in time, we have another prince. So Teucros reportedly does not have any male successors. And at some point in time, another prince from Greece arrives to the area. And now we're talking about Prince Dardanus from Arcadia. Arcadia is a mountainous region in central Peloponnese. Famous cities such as Tegea, Arcadia, Orchomenus, and Cleitor, Mantinea, and others were there. So Dardanus comes from that area. He also sails across the Aegean Sea, and he arrives to the kingdom of Teucria, King Teucros's kingdom. And he marries Batea, the daughter of King Teucros, and subsequently he's designated as the successor to the throne. He succeeds King Teucros when Teucros passes away, and thus Dardanus becomes the new king of Teucria. Now, he founds his own city. He does not rule from Hamaxitos. He founds his own city of Dardanus, which is to the north of Troy. We do know the city of Dardanus and the Dardanians, led by Prince Aeneas from the Iliad, from the time of the Trojan War. We do know them. So the founder of the city of Dardanus is Prince or King Dardanus, who succeeded Teucros and married his daughter Batea. He succeeds on the throne. He moves the capital city to his newly founded city of Dardanus, which he names after himself, and he subsequently names the whole kingdom after himself. So the kingdom of Teucria becomes known as Kingdom of Dardania. And this is where the royal Dardanian line derives from. He starts his own royal dynasty, and that's the same dynasty which is still active at the time of the Trojan War. Prince Aeneas is from that dynasty, and even the Trojan royal dynasty is just a branch of the old Dardanian dynasty founded by King Dardanus. Let's check the comments quickly. MDB Pelasgians, Luis Aldames makes correlations between the Tersanians and King Teucros. Okay. Dardanus, probably if Pelasgo-Tersanian. Okay, well, it's difficult to make those. It's past. There might be connections if you take a look at the linguistic side of it. There might be connections. But it's always difficult. At least from my perspective, it's difficult to establish them for sure. Okay, either way, after Dardanus, we move on, and hence it's called Dardanelles, right? Yes, Dardanelles, it's called after the Dardanians. Dardanians were the people, not to be confused with the Illyrian Dardanians of the Balkans region to the north of Paeonia, to the north of Macedon. In Greek mythology, those people were different and had a different mythological origins that the Dardanians of Troy. So the Trojan Dardanians are supposedly different to the Illyrian Dardanians in the region of Dardania to the north of Macedon. But yes, Dardanelles are named so after the Trojan Dardanians. There might be connection there as well, but it's just impossible to make any conclusions. So King Dardanus is then succeeded by Elos. So now there is a confusion, which there are reportedly two monarchs in Greek mythology named Elos. We have differentiated them. We have differentiated them here to Elos and Elos the second. So the first Elos, we could call him Elos the Elder, did not make a great impact. He died childless and was succeeded by his brother Erichtonius. And at the time of Erichtonius, Troy is a wealthy kingdom reportedly. As Homer says, he was the wealthiest of all men living. So at this time, we are probably talking about developed, wealthy kingdom of Troy, at least in Greek mythology. Not kingdom of Troy, excuse me. This is still kingdom of Dardania in Greek mythology. In archaeology, in actual history, we do know that the site of Troy is still the leading city in this area. It's not Dardanus. Dardanus is a smaller settlement that is perhaps connected to archaeological Troy. There might be some connection that we don't know. There's simply no record. So there are a lot of possible theories when it comes to that, but it's difficult / impossible to say. So we have the wealthy king Erichtonius. He is succeeded by Tros. And Tros is the founder of the kingdom of Troy. So King Tros is considered to be the founder of the kingdom of Troy. After him, the kingdom is called Troy, and the inhabitants of the kingdom are called the Trojans. But he did not found the city of Troy, the site of Ilion. He did not found the site of Ilion himself, and that's where we arrive to his son Elos II, the founder of the city of Ilion or Troy. He was the one that founded the city at the foot of Mount Ida in Greek mythology. That's the city of Troy, or Ilion as we know it, or Wilusa as we know it in the Hittite records. Bin Russo asks, which king did Piamaradu fight? So that's difficult to say. There were three historically recorded kings of Wilusa. We do know that Kukuni ruled in the period of the 4th century BC. We'll get to that. But when we get to the historical kings of Troy, so we'll slowly get to that. We'll finish. We only have 2 monarchs left here on the mythological list of Trojan kings. So we have after, excuse me, after King Elos II, we have his son Laomedon ascending to the throne, and contrary to what it says on this list, it mistakenly says that he also founded. This was copy pasted, but so Laomedon did not. Elos II founds the city of Troy, the city of Ilion, and then he's succeeded by his son Laomedon, who is a wealthy ruler. He is king of Troy at the time of Heracles, the legendary mighty Heracles, who arrives to the area. He has a fight with King Laomedon. Eventually, the war breaks out because Laomedon refused to pay Heracles for his services, for him saving Laomedon's daughter from mythological creatures. Heracles eventually goes to Greece, does his labors, and then comes back to Troy with a fleet of ships, and he besieges the city with his army. He breaks in, Troy falls, Heracles slays Laomedon and almost all of his children except Priam. Priam is the only child of Laomedon left alive. Heracles subsequently leaves the area, leaves the kingdom of Troy, doesn't completely destroy it, and Priam succeeds his father as the king of Troy. And then we have a very long reign of Priam. He has clashes with the Amazons. He has good relations with the neighboring Phrygians, with King Demas of Phrygia, with King Mygdon of Acmonia, another Phrygian kingdom. Eventually, Priam's children, specifically Paris, his son Paris, or Alexander, as we know, was his actual name. Prince Alexander, or Paris, abducts Helen in Sparta, and the Trojan War breaks out. And with that, we are done with the mythological kings of Troy, and we'll slowly move to the historical rulers of the city of Wilusa, as it was known to the Hittite records. So we have a question: Would Ilos II, would he be approximately? Would Ilos II of Troy approximately correspond to Troy 1 or 2? Well, just like I said, it's impossible to make those conclusions because certainly ancient Greeks and those creating the stories of Greek mythology were not really aware of the archaeological sites of Troy 0, Troy 1, Troy 2. They just considered that to be distant past, and they attached mythological figures to it. I doubt they knew when exactly Troy was settled, who were those earliest inhabitants. I'm not sure that they were aware of that. They might have been, but I'm not sure. But yes, I don't think that we can make a correlation between the mythological kings of Troy and the earliest layers of the archaeological site of Troy, because we have 7 layers from the foundation of Troy to the actually 8 layers if we count Troy 0 as a separate layer. So we have 8 archaeological layers from the foundation of the settlement all the way to the fall in the Trojan War. And we have how many mythological kings we have? Let's see. We have 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 8 mythological kings. So it would be 1 king per archaeological layer. So each king would rule over 100 years. So it's impossible to make such correlation. Yes, Luis Aldamis is right. Troy existed for almost 2,000 years. It should have been ruled by more kings or republics than the Greek legends remember. So definitely so. There were definitely more rulers of the settlement than those who are remembered in Greek mythological legends, in Greek mythology. So that was my point also, yeah. Also, most of those kings are made up from place names. That's also right. So Greek mythology has a habit of attaching eponymous rulers to different places, and so many of the ancient cities were somehow ruled by a king of the same name in Greek mythology. And yes, I agree that the ancient Greeks did not have full knowledge of the complete history of historical Troy. So we are back now to the historical era of the late Bronze Age. As we have said, the Mycenaean Greeks did have extensive relations with the city of Velusa, with the historical Troy. We do know that Troy, the archaeological sites of Troy 6 and Troy 7a, had Mycenaean archaeological features. We do notice Megaron. Reportedly, there were houses and parts of the city built in what is considered to be a typical Mycenaean era style. So they were not built in the Hittite style, or they were. What appears to be is that Troy, historical Troy, even from the earliest Trojan layers, appears to be connected to the wider Aegean area. It does not appear to be connected to the inner Anatolia. So the settlements of the Aegean in the early Bronze Age are very reminiscent of how early archaeological settlement of Troy was built. So it is believed that the people who lived in historical Troy are in some way, shape, or form connected to some of the inhabitants of the Aegean region at the time. Massive Mycenaean pottery also. So yes, there were extensive connections to the Mycenaeans. Also, at least one of these kings has what appears to be a Greek name, Alexander. We're talking about Alexander. So it is a good topic. It's a separate topic, to be clear. It's a separate topic that we're not going to be going too much into in this episode. So back to the historical Troy of late Bronze Age. The site of Velusa was known to the Mycenaeans, it was known to the Hittites, it was a major player in Western Anatolia throughout the late Bronze Age, likely Middle Bronze Age as well. And we do know that the site of Velusa was a part of a large anti-Hittite Anatolian coalition called the Asuwa League in the Hittite records. Velusa was a member of that league. It was reportedly consisted of 22 cities and kingdoms, if I'm correct. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I believe was recorded by the Hittites. Eventually, Hittite king Tudhalia defeated the coalition and broke it into, and thus the coalition was broken into many cities and smaller kingdoms that it was consisted of originally, and many of them became vassals of the Hittite Empire. And at this time, Velusa is very likely not a part of any Hittite influenced area. The Hittites are still not controlling all of Western Anatolia at this time, especially during the 14th century BC, before the reign of Shuppiluliuma. We do know that the Hittite Empire experienced some decline after initial Mycenaean expansion into Asia Minor and takeover of Miletus in the late 15th century BC. By the year 1400 BC, we already have clashes between the Mycenaeans and the Hittites for the control of the areas of Arzawa and surrounding Hittite vassal kingdoms. We do know that there is a direct battle between the Mycenaeans and the Hittites at the territory of what they called the land of Zipasla. And the Hittites managed to force the Achaean or Ahiawan force out of Zipasla, and as they pursue further into the Luca lands to the south, they get ambushed and Hittite general Kisnapile is killed together with the Hittite army, which is destroyed. And from that point on, an Arzawan ruler or an Anatolian ruler named Maduwata, who was a Hittite vassal at the time, he switches allegiance. He becomes closer to the Mycenaeans, who are led by a person named Atarsia, and he joins the Achaean expeditions against the island of Cyprus, which is supposedly, or at least claimed to be by the Hittites, their vassal state. It is unknown whether or not Hittites actually had enough power to control the kingdom of Alasia on the island of Cyprus. It is unlikely, but the Hittites claim that Alasia is their vassal, and they do send strongly lettered notes to Maduwata to make complaints, because at this point they are severely weakened by their destruction in the Luca lands. They are not able to recover. They are not able to send any more expeditions to Western Anatolia. So at this time, Wilusa is definitely out of the Hittite sphere of influence, for sure. And as we approach the late 14th century BC, situation started slows to shift. The Hittites are threatened on all fronts. The kingdom of Arzawa, which is located in Western Anatolia and sponsored by the Mycenaeans, tries to chip away more and more of the Hittite territory, and they successfully do so until the reign of Shuppiluliuma, who revives the Hittite kingdom, and he defeats Arzawa, stops the Arzawan advance, and takes control of the border kingdom of Pitasa. At this time, it is recorded that a king named Kukuni, around this time, a king named Kukuni is a ruler at Wilusa, and he is apparently either neutral or friendly towards the Hittites. He is only known from one line in a document called the Alexandru Treaty, which is more relevant to the next known ruler, Alexandru himself. It's a treaty from the early 13th century BC between the Hittite Empire and the city of Wilusa. So from that treaty, we do know that King Kukuni is one of the predecessors of Alexander. We do not know if Alexander is Kukuni's son or a grandson or otherwise other successor. We do not know if there were any rulers between Kukuni and Alexander, but the Hittite restoration happens around the reign of Kukuni. And unfortunately, we do not know the actual name of Kukuni. All of those names, Kukuni, Alexandru, and Walmu, those are Hittite renderings of Wilusan, of the Trojan names. Those were very likely not the actual Trojan names, but the Hittite renderings of the names. So Kukuni is also rendered Kyknos in ancient Greek, but this is a modern scholar construction. So whether his name was Kyknos or something similar, it's difficult to say, but it was more than likely not Kukuni. That's a Hittite rendering of the name, and Hittite language was not the same as Trojan language. It is not known which exact language the Trojans spoke, and thus it is unknown what the exact names of their monarchs were. But judging by the next ruler, which we are coming to at the moment, Alexandru, we do find it plausible that some kind of Hellenic Greek connection existed, especially when it comes to the monarchs, because Alexandru is a Hittite rendering of the Greek name Alexander. So Alexandru ascends to the throne in early 13th century BC. At this point, the Hittite Empire is back in the picture, and the Hittites are trying to assert their power in the region. They defeat the kingdom of Arzawa at this point. Arzawa is completely defeated, dissolved. The Mycenaean Greeks are unable to help the Arzawans. And the capital city of Apasa or Ephesus is defeated by the Hittites, and the area of Arzawa is broken into several Hittite vassal states, the kingdoms of Seha, Mira, and Hapala. So those three states are nominally Hittite vassals. It is unknown how much control the Hittites actually had over those three petty kingdoms. It is very possible that they were nominally under Hittite hegemony or overlordship, but as we know from constant letters and correspondence with the Hittite monarchs, Hittites had continuous problems with those kingdoms in the area, with Seha and Mira for sure, Hapala less so because it's inland and closer to the core of the Hittite territory. So I suppose that the Hittites had more control over Hapala than they did over kingdoms such as Seha and Mira. Either way, after the destruction of Arzawa, we have resurgent Hittite power in the area, and they conclude a treaty with Alexander, who at the time is a king of Belusa. And in the treaty, they clearly say that Alexander is their vassal. They clearly say that what the Velusan obligations are to send army to help the Hittite army if there is war, to look after the Hittite interests in the area, and so on and so on. The Hittites are obligated to protect Alexander and his successors if he's overthrown. So it's interesting that they made such clause in the treaty, because it tells us that an area in Alexander's reign was not very stable. So there were likely pretenders to the throne. There's also mention that the Hittites do not care whether or not a throne a throne succession in Velusa goes from father to son. He will protect Alexander and his successors. Anyway, that's what the Hittites say. So that indirectly means, or that indirectly questions the validity of Alexander's throne and the throne succession in Velusa. And either way, this is around the time or slightly after this letter, we slowly arrive to the time of Piyama Radu, a renegade warlord from Western Anatolia who made war against anybody and anything Hittite. He was heavily sponsored by the Mycenaeans. He operated in the early to mid 13th century BC, and he did take or seize large areas in the region of former Arzawa. He took that from the Hittites. He attacked Troy itself. He attacked Velusa. He had campaigns over there. He had clashes with the Hittites. He was eventually forced to flee the lands of Arzawa when the Hittite expedition arrived, but he fled to the Mycenaean controlled territories. The Hittites didn't want to touch that. They sent letters to the kingdom of Achiawa, as they called it, which we relate to the Mycenaean Greece and the highest ruler of the Mycenaean Greece, which would have been the king of Mycenae. But the Mycenaeans don't do much regarding Hittite pleads and requests. Piamaradu still roams free. He attacks Hittite lands, Hittite control areas, and he causes problems, big problems to the Hittites throughout his life. He he's His operations took place over the reign of, or at least 3 or 4 different Hittite kings, so they were unable to catch him. Eventually, he is believed to have passed of old age, and finally, at the time of Tudhaliya II, in the later part of the century, they still mention Piamaradu, but they mention him in the past tense. So they finally don't have to deal with him anymore. But at that time, as we approach the second part of the 13th century, there's no more Piamaradu, there's no more extended Mycenaean power in the area either, but there is no more Hittite hegemony in the area, which is interesting. So this brings us to the Milawata ladder, a ladder which is sent by the Hittite king to the vassal ruler of the kingdom of Mira. And there we see that the Mycenaeans do not control the city of Miletus anymore. They're out of Asia Minor. They are having either problems of their own internally, or they are pushed by either a Hittite-sponsored coalition or somebody else. We do know that Carians actually control the city at the time of the Trojan War. So it is very possible that for whatever reason, weakened Mycenaean influence leads to Carian takeover of the city of Miletus. And in the Milawata ladder, a king named Walmu is mentioned. And he is mentioned as a Trojan monarch who is deposed from the city of Wilusa. And the Hittites intend for him to be brought to the Hittite Empire by one of the Hittite vassal state rulers, and then so that the Hittites could reinstall him in Troy, in Wilusa. So that's a very brief mention of the last recorded Hittite monarch, Walmu. His ultimate fate is unknown. It is unknown if he ever reached the Hittite territory, if he was ever reinstalled on the Wilusan throne. We do know that at some point after Alexander, Walmu was king at Wilusa, and that he was deposed in vaguely attested circumstances. So he was deposed, he was pro-Hittite monarch, he was deposed, and then the Hittites wanted him back, but there are no further records on him. So we do not know what happened. We do know that the Hittite influence in the area continued to weaken, and we do know that by the reign of one of Tudhaliya IV's successors, Suppiluliuma II, by the end of the 13th and beginning of the 12th century BC, we do have a Western Anatolian coalition that goes to war against the Hittites. This is the time of the Sea Peoples. This is the time of the Bronze Age collapse. So we do know that Suppiluliuma has problems all over his kingdom. The kingdom of Ugarit, which was in Canaan, as you can see on the screen, you see Ugarit on the top right-hand corner of the map. So they used to be vassals of the Hittite Empire. That city is attacked and destroyed by a coalition known as the Sea Peoples in the early 12th century BC. Also, the kingdom of Alasia, which was reportedly also one of the Hittite either vassal states or allied states, or in some way under Hittite overlordship. Alasia is also destroyed by the Sea Peoples, and we do know that among those Sea Peoples, Mycenaean Greeks were present. So, Kingdom of Alasia is destroyed, and the Greek colonists, the Greek settlers are in charge of the island of Cyprus from now on. It is possible that we had Greek influence, Greek inhabitants on Cyprus even before this period, even before the time of the Kingdom of Alasia, the time of the Bronze Age collapse. We do know that Mycenaean king Atarsius made intrusions into the Alasian territory, but that's whole another topic. So after Walmu, Hittite influence in the area is pretty much gone. Hittites are going to war on multiple fronts, war against the Sea peoples who are now destroying Ugarit, problems with the Kaskan peoples to the north, possible emergence of the Phrygians in Asia Minor. This is now difficult to determine in detail what exactly happened because there are no records, but either way, the Shupililiuma II, he claims that he defeated his enemies in Western Anatolia. Whether he did so or not, we do not know. We do know that the Hittites did not come back to rule over that area. They got destroyed themselves very quickly. Ugarit was destroyed. And very shortly afterwards, at about 1180 BC, or at some time slightly before, slightly after that, Hattusa itself is destroyed, and that is the end of the Hittite Empire and the end of the Late Bronze Age. When it comes to the Trojan War, it certainly happened in the context of the Late Bronze Age collapse, but it's a different topic. Obviously, the kingdom of Wilusa, the city of Wilusa, is also destroyed at this time. So whether or not there are historical Hittite connections to the Trojan War or not, that's not the topic of this video. But as we know, King Walmu is the last historically recorded ruler of Wilusa. Obviously, we have Priam at the time of the Trojan War, but there are no contemporary historical records of Priam when it comes to the Hittite or other sources. He is mainly known through oral Greek tradition, which doesn't mean that he didn't exist. So it is just that the Hittites did not record what was happening at the time of their collapse, just as Mycenaeans did not record what was happening at the time of their collapse. The only people who did record these events were the Egyptians who survived the collapse, and they did so very vaguely because they did not have much connections to Mycenaean Greece. It was the edge of the known world to them, so they did not even have extensive knowledge of what was taking place in the Mycenaean Greece. Probably they did not have extensive knowledge of the Trojan War as well. They did record that the Sea coalition destroyed the Hittite Empire, destroyed lands of Arzawa, destroyed Ugarit, Alasia, and eventually came to Egypt, where they were eventually defeated by Ramses III. But with this being said, we conclude the episode. I would like to thank to everybody for showing up, and let me know how you liked this episode. We might do another one next weekend. We might do a 1 hour live program episode on the history of the Minoan civilization, beginning with the Neolithic period and then going through the pre-Palatial, early Palatial, and the Neo-Palatial periods of the Minoan history, the Thera eruption, the fall of the Minoan civilization, and the subsequent Mycenaean-controlled Crete in the late Bronze Age. We might do that episode next weekend, but as of right now, in 5 minutes, I want you to stay online. In 5 minutes, switch to the episode on the history of the Briges, the ancestors of the Phrygians who stayed in Europe and who still existed in the classical times. They were scattered around the areas north of Greece and Illyria, northern Epirus, area of Macedon, area of Halkidiki. They did not leave too much impact on the events around them, but they took part of some of the events. It's a very interesting episode, so make sure to check it out. And with that being said, thank you very much for showing up, and see you again soon.